They stuck me in a storage closet on the family trip. But the hotel? Yeah, I built it. Stay with me while I tell you everything that happened. And if my story means something to you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to hear it too. I really thought this family trip would be different. It had been a while since we all got together, and I was hoping we could finally connect, maybe even feel like a real family for once. But the second I arrived, I could feel it. The looks, the cold smiles, the way no one even came out to greet me properly. I tried to stay positive. I smiled. I wheeled my suitcase and like everything was fine. Then they handed me a key and said, "Sorry, the rooms are tight. Hope you don't mind this one." It wasn't a room. It was a storage closet. Not officially, of course, but anyone with eyes could see it. The walls were unfinished in some places. The tiles were cracked. The light flickered nonstop. And the bed? It wasn't even a bed. It was a fold-up cot pushed into the corner, right next to an old mop sink. I stood there, stunned, as my cousin Brooke passed by me talking loudly about her Lakeview suite with the big bathtub. My brother Aaron boasted to someone about how he scored the executive king room because he needed the space. No one looked at me. No one asked how my room was. But I was okay, because they didn't know. They didn't know I helped design this hotel. They didn't know I was part owner through a company I'd started years ago. They didn't know I had walked through this building in a hard hat, checking every detail, from the windows to the lobby lights. They thought I was just Claire. Quiet Claire. The one who always said yes. The one they forgot to include in conversations, or who they only remembered when they needed something. They never saw me, not really. And this trip? It was supposed to be my chance to be seen. Instead, they gave me a closet with a cot. But that night, as I lay there staring at the ceiling and listening to the pipes rattle behind the wall, something in me changed. I looked around that cold little room and realized I had waited long enough. I had let them treat me like nothing and smiled through it for years. Now, it was time they finally saw me, not just as Claire, but as the woman who built the ground they were walking on. Claire wasn't surprised when they gave her the worst room on the trip. Deep down, a part of her expected it. That's just how things had always been in her family. Growing up, she was the one everyone relied on, but never really saw. She was the helper, the quiet one. If someone needed a ride, Claire would drop what she was doing. If there were dishes to wash, Claire was already standing at the sink. If someone was upset, Claire would listen for hours, even when no one ever asked how she felt. But when it came to birthdays, achievements, or even simple kindness, she was invisible. Her brother Aaron was the golden child. Always praised, always admired. He brought home average grades and got a cake. Claire graduated with honors and barely got a nod. If she ever asked for anything, her parents would say, "Don't be selfish, Claire. Stay humble." She learned not to ask anymore. Her cousin Brooke was no better. Brooke loved to tease her, especially when Claire chose to study architecture. "That's so boring," she would say, flipping her perfect hair. "You should do something glamorous, like fashion or media." Claire never said anything back. She just smiled, focused on her work, and kept going. Through college, late nights, and long internships, Claire built her own life from the ground up. She never boasted. Never told them when she got promoted. When she signed her first deal. When her designs started being used in real building. She wanted to succeed quietly, maybe because a part of her still hoped they'd one day care enough to ask. So when the invitation came for the family trip, Claire hesitated. But something in her said maybe this time would be different. Maybe they would see how far she'd come. Maybe they'd ask about her life, her work, her dreams. Maybe they'd finally see her. But they didn't. Instead, they laughed louder than ever. Aaron joked about how Claire still hadn't figured out what she wanted to do. Brooke called her the quiet one and said she always seemed lost. No one asked where she was staying. No one noticed when she carried her own bags up the stairs alone. Claire didn't cry. She didn't get angry. She just sat there, listening to the same voices that had pushed her into the background her whole life. This trip wasn't a clean slate. It was just a fresh scar added to the old one. But unlike before, Claire wasn't going to stay quiet. She had worked hard. She had built something incredible. And while they were too busy looking down on her to see it, she knew her worth. She had nothing to prove to them. But still, they were going to learn exactly who they had overlooked. Claire rolled her suitcase down the long hallway, passing room after room with polished gold numbers and beautiful wooden doors. She finally stopped in front of a plain, narrow door at the far end. The number was crooked, barely hanging on by one screw. Her fingers trembled slightly as she turned the key. The room was small. No, not small. It was wrong. The light overhead buzzed as it flickered. The floor tiles were cracked in places, with scuff marks like something heavy had been dragged across them. There was no closet, no desk, no real bed, just a metal cot pushed against the wall, covered in thin, scratchy sheets. One small window was fogged with dust, letting in almost no light. Claire didn't move for a moment. She stood in the middle of the room, holding her breath, the hum of the light mixing with the quiet ache inside her chest. She knew this space. She knew every inch of it. 3 years ago, Claire had been hunched over her desk in a studio apartment, red pen in one hand, coffee in the other, drawing the first version of this hotel. Back then, she was just starting out. She'd landed a quiet but important deal through an international firm, one that kept her name off any public paperwork. But the blueprints were hers. The layout, the materials, the flow of light. She had built this place in her mind before it existed in stone and glass. And now, here she was, standing in a storage room. A room that wasn't meant to be a guest room. A space marked on the blueprint as utility. A leftover corner of the building, meant to hold supplies, not people. She remembered arguing with the contractors about this exact room, saying it needed better insulation because it bordered the pipes. She had done her job well. Too well, because now her own family thought this was all she deserved. Claire placed her suitcase by the cot and sat down slowly. The mattress creaked under her weight. She glanced at the exposed pipe along the ceiling, her eyes tracing the line like she had done with her pencil so many times before. Her family didn't know. Not about her work. Not about this hotel. Not about the long nights she spent perfecting every hallway and suite. They didn't know the person they had shoved aside was the very one who helped build the place they were bragging about. She laid back, arms crossed over her chest, staring at the ceiling. A slow breath left her lips. This was the moment. This was the turning point. For years, she had let them ignore her, overlook her, step over her. But not anymore. They wanted to put her in a corner and forget her? Fine. But now, they were going to remember exactly who she was. 3 years ago, Claire sat in a tiny apartment with a leaky faucet and a borrowed laptop. Her phone buzzed with a new email, and her heart stopped when she saw the subject. Congratulations, contract awarded. She had done it. After months of applying, working on proposals, and designing through the night, Claire landed her first major architectural project, a luxury lakeside hotel. The firm that hired her was based abroad, and the deal was structured through a joint venture. She would work behind the scenes, under an LLC, designing every inch of the property. Her name wouldn't be on the advertisements. No interviews. No public credit. But the money? The ownership stake? That was hers. While her family thought she was unemployed or still figuring things out, Claire was sketching room layouts and sending in 3D mock-ups. She was on calls with engineers and suppliers, negotiating lighting fixtures and spa layouts. She was approving marble samples, testing soundproofing for the suites, and picking artwork for the hallways. She'd work all day, then spend the evenings video calling contractors in different time zones. No one saw her hustle. Her mom only called to ask if she could help babysit for Brooke's kids. Her brother Aaron sent her job listings, just in case she needed ideas. Everyone assumed Claire was just floating through life, still stuck in that same quiet shell. And she let them believe it, because Claire didn't need to explain herself any. She wasn't working for praise. She was working for something bigger, something that would last. When the hotel finally opened, Claire attended the soft launch quietly, sitting in the back of the room as the investors gave speeches. No one knew the woman in the simple black dress had chosen the chandelier above them. No one knew she had designed the curve of the lobby staircase, or insisted on the hand-painted tiles in the main bathroom. She didn't take a bow. She took notes. She reinvested her earnings. She bought shares under the LLC's name. She built something solid, not just the hotel, but her future. Still, every holiday, every family dinner, they'd ask, "So what are you doing now?" She'd smile and say, "Just working on a few things." And they'd nod like they felt sorry for her, like she had missed out. But Claire didn't need them to clap for her. Until now. Now, standing in a hotel she helped build, staying in the worst room they could find for her, something had shifted. They had ignored her success for years, but now they were living in it, walking on her floors, sleeping in her rooms. And soon they were going to realize it. Claire wasn't figuring things out. She had already arrived. They just weren't paying attention. The dining room buzzed with laughter, silverware clinking against glass, and the sound of wine being poured into crystal glasses. It was the final night of the family trip, and everyone was gathered for a special dinner at the hotel's private restaurant. Everyone except Claire, it seemed. While the rest of her family sat at a long table under a chandelier, Claire was placed at a small, round table near the kitchen doors. The waitstaff passed by her with trays, barely noticing her. She didn't complain. She didn't ask to move. She just sat there, quietly watching. Her cousin Brooke wore a glittery dress and had taken over the conversation, going on about how she needed luxury to feel alive. She made sure everyone knew how much her spa treatment cost, and how certain people just don't understand elegance. Claire didn't flinch. Then Aaron stood up, raising his glass. "To success," he said, smiling proudly. "To working hard, making smart choices, and earning your place at the top. Nothing beats that feeling." The family clapped, some a little too loudly. Claire took a slow sip of her water. She didn't need champagne. A moment later, her mom turned to her and said, "Claire, honey, can you take a photo of us? You don't mind, right?" Her mom held out a phone like it was nothing. Claire didn't hesitate. She stood up, walked to the front of the room, and lined up the shot. Her brother draped an arm around Brooke. Her mom fixed her hair, then smiled wide like everything was perfect. Claire's hands didn't shake. She clicked the button, capturing the moment. And then she smiled too. But her smile wasn't the same as theirs. Because in that moment, Claire wasn't hurt anymore. She wasn't waiting to be seen. She wasn't hoping someone would finally ask her about her life, or realize how far she'd come. She was done waiting. She looked around the room. The chairs, the curtains, the soft glow of the lights on the ceiling. She had picked those lights. She had approved those chairs. The curved arch above the bar had been her idea. Her vision. Her design. They were all sitting inside her work. And still they saw her as nothing. But soon they wouldn't have a choice. Claire walked back to her tiny table by the kitchen, picked up her napkin, and placed it gently in her lap. She wasn't angry. She didn't feel small. She felt focused. They had made it clear who they thought she was. Now it was time to show them who she really was. Not the errand runner. Not the invisible helper. Not the quiet failure they assumed she'd always be. No, Claire was the architect of their surroundings, and their lesson was about to begin. That night, after the dinner, Claire walked quietly back to her little storage room. She closed the door behind her, sat on the cot, and picked up her phone. No emotion crossed her face. Just focus. She dialed a private number. "Hi, it's Claire Monroe. I need a few changes made for tomorrow." The voice on the other end didn't ask questions, just replied, "Understood." Claire had spent years building relationships with the hotel's team. The manager, the head of maintenance, even the front desk staff. They all knew who she was, and they respected her because she never asked for attention. She just did the work and treated everyone with kindness. So when she asked for something to be done, they didn't hesitate. By morning, the changes were in motion. Brooke's deluxe suite suddenly had plumbing issues. The spa shower she bragged about? Out of order. Maintenance arrived early with loud tools, warning her not to use any water for the next few hours. She wasn't pleased. Meanwhile, Aaron got a knock at his door. The hotel apologized for a double booking error. A VIP guest was set to arrive, and unfortunately, Aaron's room had been assigned to them by mistake. He was being relocated to a ground floor room at the back of the building, just beside the loading dock. He threw a fit in the hallway, demanding to speak to management. But no one budged. Rules were rules. Apologies were offered, but no one could change the system. Claire, on the other hand, was already checking into the penthouse suite under her alternate name, a private guest alias reserved just for her. The staff greeted her warmly. Her favorite fruit plate was waiting in the room. The view overlooked the lake. The sheets were Egyptian cotton. There was a welcome note handwritten by the general manager. "Glad to have you with us again, Ms. Monroe." She didn't ask for special treatment. It was simply hers. As the day went on, the family grew restless. Brooke complained loudly in the lounge, wrapped in a hotel robe, her hair wet from a cold shower. Aaron sulked near the bar, muttering about the noise from the trucks outside his window. Their mother asked Claire to help speak to someone at the front desk, but Claire just smiled and said, "I'm just enjoying my stay like everyone else." No one suspected a thing. Behind the scenes, the hotel staff remained silent. They knew who Claire was. They knew what she had done for this place. But they respected her wish for privacy. Let the family complain. Let them wonder why things were suddenly falling apart. Claire wasn't angry. She was calm. She sipped tea on her private balcony, watching the sun rise over the lake. She had designed that balcony. She had chosen the angle for the perfect morning light. Everything was finally falling into place. And no one even knew they were walking straight into her quiet storm. By the second day, the mood of the family trip had changed. The smiles were tighter. The laughter didn't last as long. Small complaints started slipping into every conversation. Brooke stormed into the breakfast buffet, her hair in a messy bun and her voice sharp. "This is ridiculous. Why does Aaron always get the good treatment? First the big room, now the private shuttle to the winery." She wasn't entirely wrong. Aaron had gotten special treatment, until now. But Brooke didn't know his room now faced the dumpsters and echoed with delivery trucks every morning. Aaron rolled his eyes. "Maybe if you didn't make a fuss about every little thing, the staff would actually help you. You're not the only one here, Brooke." Their aunt chimed in from across the table, frowning at her plate. "Is it just me, or has the food gotten worse? The chicken last night was dry. I could have made better at home." She pushed her plate away with a dramatic sigh. Meanwhile, Claire sat quietly at the edge of the table, her coffee warm in her hands, a small smile on her lips. Her mother turned to her and said, "Claire, maybe you could go ask the front desk for help with all this. You're good at sorting things out." Claire didn't even blink. She gently placed her cup down and said, "I think I'll just enjoy my stay for once." Her mother gave her a confused look, but said nothing. It was the first time Claire had said no, and someone noticed. Jessica, Claire's soft-spoken cousin who had always kept to herself, had been observing everything. She'd never been cruel like the others, just quiet and often ignored. But today, she watched Claire more closely. She saw how the staff greeted Claire with a nod of respect, how the server at lunch placed her plate with extra care, how Claire, without hesitation, walked into the manager's office without knocking, and how the manager greeted her with a smile and stood to offer his chair. Jessica's eyes widened. She didn't say anything right away. She simply watched Claire come out of the office a few minutes later, calm as ever, and rejoin the group like nothing happened. Later that evening, as everyone argued over dinner reservations and shuttle times, Jessica quietly sat beside Claire on a bench outside. After a long pause, she asked, "Claire, do you know the manager?" Claire looked at her with a knowing smile. Something like that. Jessica didn't push. She just nodded and said, "I always knew there was more to you." For the first time on the trip, Claire felt seen, not by everyone, but by someone who mattered. The family was cracking, each of them too busy blaming one another to see what was really happening. But Jessica saw the truth beginning to show through the cracks. And Claire? She was just getting started. The final night of the trip arrived, and the family gathered once again in the grand dining hall for what was supposed to be a farewell celebration. The room was warm with golden lights, soft music playing in the background, and plates of food being served with elegance. Everyone looked dressed up, but the energy was off. Too many quiet stares, too many fake smiles. The cracks in the family had grown deeper. Claire arrived last. She wore a simple black dress, nothing flashy, but somehow, she looked like she belonged in a different world. Calm, composed. The kind of calm that made people uneasy without knowing why. Everyone settled into their seats. Claire was no longer at the corner table near the kitchen. Tonight, she had a seat in the center. The general manager of the hotel, Mr. Daniels, stepped up to the front of the room and tapped his glass for attention. "Good evening, everyone. On behalf of the entire staff, thank you for choosing our hotel for your family gathering. It's been our pleasure to host you all." A polite round of applause followed. "But before we wrap things up," Mr. Daniels continued, "we'd like to take a moment to recognize someone very special, someone who helped bring this entire place to life." The room grew quiet. Claire's mother raised her eyebrows, curious. Erin looked around. Brooke sipped her wine, uninterested. Mr. Daniels smiled. "Among our guests this week is one of the hotel's lead architects, and a minority owner as well. Please help me thank Ms. Claire Monroe." Silence. Then heads turned. Claire stood slowly, her hands relaxed at her sides. She looked around the room, at the faces that had overlooked her, spoken over her, dismissed her. "I never planned to say anything," she said softly, but her voice carried. "But I think it's time." She took a few steps forward. 3 years ago, I helped design this hotel. Every hallway you walked through, every room you slept in, every window that framed the view, I helped create that. I worked in silence, through long nights and quiet mornings, and I never once mentioned it to you. No one spoke. You all stayed in something I built. I just didn't realize I also built the stage for your judgment. Claire turned slightly toward Brooke and Erin. "You talked about who deserves luxury, who earns their place. You mocked me, dismissed me, ignored me, all while standing inside my work." Her mother's face turned pale. Erin's jaw tightened. Brooke looked stunned. "I didn't need recognition," Claire said. "But I'm done pretending I'm small just because you choose not to see me." She stepped back and took her seat. The silence that followed was heavy, thick with shock and shame. But Claire didn't need applause. She had finally been seen, not for what they thought she was, but for who she had always been. And that was enough. The room stayed quiet long after Claire sat down. No one touched their food. No one looked at each other. The truth sat heavy between them, impossible to ignore now. Claire picked up her glass of water and took a slow sip, her face calm. Inside, she felt something shift, not anger, not triumph, just peace. She had finally said it out loud. They finally knew. Her mother was the first to break the silence. She blinked quickly, her voice shaky. "Claire, I didn't know. You never said anything." Then, with a hand pressed to her chest, she whispered, "I always believed in you. I always knew you'd do something special." Claire turned her head slowly and looked at her. Her eyes were steady. "No, Mom," she said quietly. "You believed in Erin. You believed in Brooke. With me, you hoped I'd stay quiet and not embarrass anyone." Her mother covered her mouth, tears spilling down her cheeks. But Claire didn't rush to comfort her. She had done that too many times before. Tonight, she just watched. Erin, red-faced and tense, slammed his napkin on the table. "So what? You designed a hotel? You think that makes you better than us?" Claire shook her head once. "No," she replied calmly. "I don't think I'm better. I just know I never needed to prove myself to people who never cared to ask." Brooke stood up quickly, knocking her chair back. "This whole thing is just weird. Honestly, you've changed, Claire." She grabbed her purse, shot one last glance around the table, and muttered, I'm leaving. No one stopped her. Claire looked around the table one last time. Her aunt wouldn't meet her eyes. Her mother kept dabbing her tears. Aaron was still fuming. Jessica, the only one who had truly noticed anything before the reveal, gave her a quiet, respectful nod. Claire stood up slowly. Next time, she said, her voice gentle but firm, maybe ask where someone's been before deciding where they belong. She turned and walked out of the dining room, heels tapping lightly against the floor she had chosen years ago. She passed the lobby she designed, the artwork she selected, and the front desk staff who smiled at her like they always had. At the front counter, she left her room key and a handwritten note for the manager, along with a thick envelope. Cover the next 2 nights for the family, she'd written. Paid in full. No need to tell them who. And then she walked out of the hotel. The night air was cool, and for the first time in years, Claire felt light. She didn't need their praise. She didn't care about their pride. She had built something beautiful, not just a hotel, but a life. They hadn't seen it until now. But they never would again. Claire stepped into her quiet city apartment, the soft hum of traffic outside her window a welcome sound. The space was warm, filled with soft light and shelves lined with books and design models. No clutter, no noise, just peace. She set down her suitcase, took off her coat, and sat by the window, staring out at the skyline she had always loved. For the first time, the silence didn't feel lonely. It felt earned. On the small table by her door, a white envelope waited. Her name was written on the front in neat, familiar handwriting. She opened it slowly. It was from Jessica. Inside was a short letter, simple but sincere. Claire, I'm sorry I stayed quiet all these years. I saw things. I just didn't speak up. But that night, I saw you clearly, and I want you to know I'm proud of you. Not just for what you built, but for finally standing in it. Jessica. Claire smiled, folding the letter carefully and placing it in her drawer. It was the only response she had gotten from anyone in the family. No calls, no emails, just that quiet, handwritten truth. And it was enough. In the weeks that followed, Claire dove back into her work, but this time differently. She no longer stayed in the background. Her next project, a modern library in the heart of the city, carried her name proudly on every press release. She was invited to panels, interviews, and even a feature in a design magazine. The world started to notice her, but more importantly, she stopped hiding. She went to ribbon cuttings. She shook hands with clients. She stood beside her work and claimed it without apology. For years, she'd let others define her, quiet, simple, average. Now she was showing the truth, strong, focused, and absolutely capable. The family kept their distance. Claire didn't hear from Aaron or Brooke. Her mother sent one awkward text that simply said, "Hope you're doing well." Claire never replied. She didn't need to. She wasn't angry anymore, just done. She thought about everything they'd said over the years, the mocking, the judgment, the way they acted like she was always one step behind. And she realized something. Being underestimated wasn't the worst thing they ever did to her. No, the worst would have been if she let them keep doing it. But she didn't. She stood up. She claimed her space. She walked into the light and stayed there. Claire didn't seek revenge. She never needed it. What she found instead was clarity. Clarity about who she was. And peace in knowing she no longer had anything to prove to people who never cared to see her in the first place. What about you? If you were in Claire's shoes, would you have revealed the truth or kept it quiet? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'm really curious. And if stories like this speak to you, make sure to hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss what's coming next.